Alright, what's up guys? Mr. Martin back. 11.3, we are now talking about the quadratic formula, one of my favorites. Alright, so hopefully you guys have done well with 11.1 and 11.2. Now we're going to be doing a lot of good old-fashioned substitutions. So today I will be able to use the quadratic formula, and we're going to solve quadratics that are not factorable. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about what we know as the discriminant. This is going to help us identify how many types of solutions, just like in the last lesson when we looked at those different types of graphs. Alright, let's get right to it. So we got a good little chunk of info, and again I went ahead and printed this out for you so that you have it. I would highly recommend trying to memorize this formula. It's very good to use. There's actually some songs on the internet that were made for it, and I'm definitely not going to sing them for you. But what it is negative b. Remember, with square roots we got a plus or minus, and then we got radical of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this little part right here, the expression underneath the radical, okay, this part is what we call the discriminant, and this gives us a look at the types of solutions we're going to have, and these rules are as follows. So if after you evaluate the b squared minus the 4ac, and please use your orders of operations, your PEMDAS, please do it correctly. If you're positive, you're going to have two solutions, okay? If it comes out to a 0, you're going to have that one solution, and if you have a negative number, that's where you can just go ahead and stop what you're doing, write 0 solution, because we're not going to deal with the imaginary numbers. So this kind of, just gives you a sneak peek at, what you're going to have before you kind of even get to the rest of what's going on. Alright, so another good piece for us to talk about. If you look here to the right of the coordinate plane, okay, this might catch your eye as the quadratic formula from the piece before. Some of you might say, oh, it looks a little bit different. It's actually the same. Let's go back real quick. If you see, we have all of this top part all over 2a. In this case right here, all I did was separate the negative b, okay? And remember, we can do this with fractions. Remember way back in the day, if you added something like 2/3 plus 5/3, right? You know that you can add the numerators because your denominator is the same. And this would look something like 5 plus 2 over 3. Okay, it's very good that you're cognizant about what's going on here, because when we get to our solutions and we actually simplify them, you're going to want to know how to break these apart and so on. Okay, so that's exactly what I did here. Alright, and the reason we did this, right, you guys recognize this piece. Remember, this is what helps us find the x value of our vertex. So if I have a graph, let's say I have a graph like this. I got my nice beautiful looking quadratic right here, and then I have my axis of symmetry. Let me draw a nice little line right here. That's not what I'm looking for. Maybe something like this. Alright, so this is my axis of symmetry, okay? What this piece does right here, with this plus or minus, I'm going to put this in green, okay? So all of this piece right here with this plus or minus, what this does is this gives us the distance from the axis of symmetry to our zeros. So this is our plus from that plus or minus, and then remember, it's a parabola, so these are equidistant, and this is our minus. So just kind of a fun fact, muchachos, for this piece. Alright, our steps for solving these quadratics. Number 1, you always want to put your quadratic into standard form. This is a must. And if you're solving quadratics, remember, standard form looks like this. and we want to set it equal to 0. Okay, we always want everything on the left side and then that 0 on the right. Then we want to find our A, B, and C values. Okay, A, B, and C. Then we're going to substitute those values into our quadratic formula, and then we'll go ahead and list our solutions appropriately. All right, remember, these just take time. So I got a good chunk of examples for you here and some nice healthy homework for us to do. All right, so we got our first quadratic. It looks like we're in standard form. I'm going to go ahead and set this equal to 0. But let's go ahead, identify our A, B, and C values. So I have an A value of a positive 1. I have a B value of a positive 4. And a C value of a positive 3. Okay. So hopefully you have the formula in front of you. I'm just going to write it here so we can see it. But when I do these other examples, I'm just going to start plugging them in. And remember, I highly recommend plug these in using parentheses. You don't want to mess up on any of your signs. It is very known to happen. Alright, so I start with my negative b. Remember, these signs are always part of this quadratic formula. And then I just start substituting. I got a positive 4. I have my plus or minus. I got my square root. I start with my b again. 4 squared minus a 4 times my a value, and then times my c value. And I'm going to put this all over 2 times my a value. Okay. Now, everyone approaches their process different. What I like to do, and this is the reason why I talked about the discriminant, I like to solve for the discriminant before I even think about this square root part. So I'm going to simplify this part right here. We know this negative times a positive 4 will give me a negative 4. We got our plus or minus, and then I draw this square root. So here I would type this into my calculator. Okay, so if you have your calculator up, you know that you're going to have a 4 squared. Okay, positive 4 squared. And then that's going to give you a 16. Okay, and then you're going to subtract, right? I got minus, and then let me just go ahead and put this all in parentheses. 4 times 1 times 3, and then I'm going to close that off. So you see I'm going to end up getting a positive 4 right here. So remember, if you only have one minus sign right here, this is all going to be minus some of this piece right here. If we had some negative values, that would be different. Okay, and this is all going to go over 2 times 1, which is a positive 2. Okay, in this case, we have a nice, easy number to square root, so let's go ahead and do that. We got a negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4, which is a 2, and this is all over 2. And then now we want to simplify to get our 2 solutions. Okay, so on one case, I'm going to have a negative 4 plus 2 all over 2. And my other one, I'm going to have a negative 4 minus 2 all over 2. Alright, so negative 4 minus 2 gives me a negative 6 over 2. After I divide this out, I'm going to get a negative 3. The one here on the left, I got a negative 4 plus 2, which is a negative 2 all over a positive 2, which gives me a negative 1. So I now have my solution, negative 1 and negative 3. Alright, not so bad, right? It's just a matter of plug and play and make sure that you're doing your arithmetic correctly. And if you do have a graphing calculator, you can actually use the fraction function in your parentheses and the square root function. Type this in, but you're going to want to do it twice because you got a positive and you got a negative. There's no plus minus that you can do. Alright, looking at example number 2, it does not look like we are in standard form, so I need to move everything to one side, and I do that by subtracting a 30 from both sides. So that's going to give me r squared plus 7r minus 30 equals 0. Now that I have my standard form, I want to go ahead and find my a, b, and c values. I have an a value of 1, a b value of 7, and a c value of negative 30. Alright, let's go ahead. We're going to be using this. Let me put this in a blue box just so everyone knows what we're using. And let's start plugging away. I'll do purple this time. Alright, so I have a negative. What's my b value? Positive 7. Plus or minus the square root of my b value squared minus 4 times my a value of 1 times my c value of negative 30. Okay, notice now I got two negative signs going on. We're going to have some kind of plus going on. Alright, this is all over 2 times my a value. So let's go ahead and evaluate this discriminant. We got negative 7 on the left, plus or minus. This is going to be a 49. I'm going to go ahead and multiply these two negative signs. So a negative times a negative will give me a positive. 4 times 1 will be a 4. And then 30 times 4 is going to be 120. I put this all over 2 times 1, which is a 2. And then I can write my next line of work. We can actually add this up. Plus or minus square root 49 plus 120. That gives me a 169 all over a positive 2. Alright, thinking back, 169, is this a perfect square? It sure is. That's a 13. So we can go ahead and do that. So we got plus or minus 13 all over 2. We got our two equations that we need to write now, which is negative 7 plus 13 all over 2. And we got negative 7 minus 13 all over 2. So a negative 7 plus 13 is going to give me a, what is that, a positive 6. Right, 13 minus 7 is 6 over 2, which is a positive 3. This is a negative 7 minus 13, so I get a negative 20 over 2, and that gives me a negative 10. So our solution is negative 10 and positive 3. Alright, so I hope you guys are getting this, understanding it. I'm going to go ahead and have you pause the video here, try the third one on your own, and then come back and see what we got. Alright, welcome back. So I hope you ended up with negative 1, comma 1 for your solution set. Once we moved this 8 over, that gave us negative 2b squared plus 2. If you notice, we don't have an x term or a b term for this example, so that value is actually 0. So we only have an a term of negative 2, a b term of 0, and a c value of 2. So after we plug this all in, we get 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times 2 all over 2 times negative 2, which comes down to plus or minus square root of 16 over negative 4. We get a plus minus 4 over negative 4, bringing us down to these two fractions, and we're left with a negative 1, comma 1. Okay, so these first three examples, very easy, smooth numbers. I'm definitely going to throw in a couple problems that have radicals for solutions. So let's try some of these. All right, I'm going to add this 4m and subtract this 23 to one side, right? Because we want everything on the left. So minus 23 plus 4m. You know it's coming. Alright, so this is going to give me 12m squared. I have a plus 4m and a minus 23. This is all equal to 0. I always like to label my A, B, and C. If you're comfortable with just eyeballing it, more power to you, but for these purposes, I'm going to go ahead and label these. Alright, looks like we got some big numbers here. Maybe we'll have something a little challenging. So, I kind of feel like you should have memorized this formula by now. We've done 3 problems, so remember it is negative b. What's my b value? 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Let's get rid of that there. B squared minus 4 times our a value times our c value all over 2 times our a value. Alright, this is going to change to a negative 4. We got a plus or minus. I'm going to have a 4 squared, which is a 16. I got a minus and a minus, so I know I'm going to need a plus. And I'm going to use my calculator here because these are some big numbers. So we got 4 times 12 times 23 equals 1,104. Yep, 1,104. All over 2 times 12, which is 24. If I can even write 4s, I apologize, guys. This is very frustrating. Alright, so we add the 16 to the 1,104, okay, and we're going to get some giant number, 1,120, all over 24. Okay, we definitely want to reduce this radical. We know how to, but this will take some playing around. This is where dividing by those perfect squares is going to be very helpful. You probably won't want to factor tree this number. Alright, so let's kind of play around with it. If we got 1,120, oop, too many ones, and we divide by, let's try 49. Does that work? No, we're going to get a decimal. So 49 might not work. Let's try something a little smaller, maybe 16. Bam, looks like 16 works. Alright, so we can actually rewrite that as negative 4 plus or minus square root of 16 times the square root of 70. And again, this is all over 24. Okay, so this is going to give me a 4, so we're going to have 4 radical 70. So we're left with negative 4 plus or minus 4 radical 70 all over 24. Okay, so I mean, this can be a way to just list your solution. I would like you guys to be able to break this apart. Okay, and by doing that, right, this negative 4 and this 4, that's the coefficient in front of this radical 70, these both have the same denominator of 24. That's why they're in the numerator. So we can reduce this, right? We know that 4 over 24 can be reduced. How many times does 4 go into 24? It goes in 6 times, right? So we can actually reduce this to a negative 1 plus or minus, right? And we'll have a 1 in front of the radical 70, and since it's a coefficient of 1, we don't need to put the 1. And we just have the radical 70, and then this is now all over 6. So now we can write our 2 solutions. We have a negative 1 plus radical 70 all over 6. And we also have a negative 1, oh, that's kind of far off. Negative 1 minus radical 70 also all over 6. I know, these ones get a little tough, believe me. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here. I want you to try the next two. It's important you guys get enough practice, and then you can come back and see me work through it. Alright, welcome back. So I went ahead and moved these values over, which got me to 7a squared minus 3a minus 5. Found my a, b, and c. And then I went ahead and plugged them in. See, this is that part that I'm talking about where some of you guys might mess your signs up. When you see them substituted in parentheses, you get a good look of if you should change them to a positive or not. So let's go ahead and simplify this out. We get a positive 3 plus or minus this negative 3 squared. Remember, this whole quantity is being squared, so this is going to give us a positive 9. And we got negative 4 times 5, which is negative 20. And negative 20 times 7, well, negative 140. Am I right? 20 times 7? Yes. Negative 140. And this is all over 2 times 7, which is going to be a, let's put that back. 14. Okay. All right. Whoops. I do have a mistake here. This should be a plus 5. We used a plus 5 right here. This should be plus 5. 15 minus 10 is plus 5. All right. So once we get to here, we got a 3 plus or minus 9 minus 140, right? We're going to end up having a negative number, is negative 131 all over 14. Okay. These stupid 4s. Okay. So remember what I talked about when we know our discriminant right here. Oops, this page. If our discriminant is negative, that's going to give us that 0 solutions. So once we get to this point and we know that we're going to end up trying to square root a negative, you can just stop. You like my stop sign here? Stop. And we're just going to write no solutions. Alright, so I'm pretty sure you guys are hoping for a lot of these. Not bad. But I would like to see you do the work getting up to this point. That way we can see that there are no solutions. So when I give you some of these problems, I'm going to make sure that I require you guys to show your work. Alright, go ahead and work through the next one if you haven't already. I'll be right back. Alright, nice to see you again. I'm sure you got the same thing I did because you're working hard and you're learning. I love it. Good work. So you should have came down to this and realized, hey, 4 minus 20 gives me that negative 16. And then bam, I have another no solution. Alright, we have one more set of examples. Okay, these are all similar to the ones that we've done before. I'd like you guys to try these on your own. I don't want to make the video any longer than I have to. But I'm going to work these out for you guys so you can check your work. So go ahead, pause the video, and I'll be right back. Alright, so if you tried out this first one, moving the 9x from this right side over just cancels this one out. So we're left with 4x squared minus 19, leaving us with no b values. So we got a b value of 0. We plug all this in. We end up getting this big old 304. Plus or minus radical 304 over 8. Fiddled around with dividing, found out that 16 times 19 gives me 304. I can square root that 16. I'm down to positive, or plus minus 4 radical 19 over 8, which simply reduces 4 over 8 is 1/2. So we have a positive 1 radical 19 over 2 and a negative 1 radical 19 over 2. Oh. Let's do that there and circle this up. All right, I'm going to work out the next one for you. All right, thanks for coming back. Okay, so I got these last two worked out. Go ahead and see if you had a similar process. Hopefully you ended up at the same solutions that I got. Calculate your A, B's, and C's, and just go through those same steps. It just takes a little bit of practice and patience, and just my biggest thing to talk about is make sure that you calculate that discriminant correctly and really utilize those skill sets you learned from simplifying radicals. All right, go ahead and try the homework. There's a good chunk of problems there for you. You got the answer keys. Make sure you do the work, show the work, go through these steps. You'll definitely get it. I got faith in you. All right, I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.